This video is about funded contingency provision in a project finance transaction. So this is the blog post that I'm preparing about this topic that I'm going to share with you. But when it comes to contingency provision, first of all, the definition is quite simple, right? Anybody who has ever put a budget together knows that you first estimate your base costs, and of course, we are human and we make mistakes and things happen. So we always put a budget for unexpected things. And that is the contingency provision, which is funded during construction. So as you can see, the concept is easy, but there are still some things that we can discuss here. So I put it in form of a couple of questions that I'm going to answer here. The first question is, how do I estimate the amount of contingency provision required in my project? So the answer to this question is it depends. Why? Because it depends on the project, it depends on the type of technology, so it depends on the level of riskiness of the project. However, there are still some benchmarks that you can use, and you can find it online, like 5 to 10% of total project cost for renewable projects. For mining and oil and gas, it might be higher, 10 to 20%, even higher. So the amount really depends on the type of project. However, if we go to our Excel here, and I have an update here, let me just leave it for now. But yeah, so this is in my financial model here. You see, this is my input sheet, the constant input sheet. I put it together in form of scenario analysis. So I have these different cases, different scenarios that I can define. And with the help of a simple index function, I can choose and switch in between these different scenarios. So in terms of contingency here, you see that I have these base cost estimate for my different costs, EPC, development cost, insurance, and so on. But when it comes to contingency, I provide 4 options, okay? Option number 1 is funded contingency is defined as a percentage of EPC, or like your major cost. So in my case here, or in most infrastructure project, EPC is the major cost. So we just take a percentage of the EPC, and that's how we're going to estimate and size our contingency fund. Some other lending institutions, they basically advise to have contingency not only on the capex, on the base cost, but also on the financing cost, like interest during construction, commitment fee, upfront fee, and all those fees, because it's true that there might be also some risks of cost overrun when it comes to financing costs. Like if you didn't hedge your interest rate might go up and down. So they recommend to also have a contingency provision on the financing costs as well. So it is defined here as a percentage of total project cost. And then later on, as you progress with the project, you might want to have the option as well to hard code the contingency amount into the financial model. So that's option 3. Another option which is also useful is, let me switch it to that so that we can see it. You can see that in this one, for each and every cost item in my budget, I am defining a percentage contingency provision. So these are the different methods that I am using to include and integrate the sizing of funded contingency into my models. Now the question number 2 is, which is always an important question, is where can I find this amount, the terms of this funded contingency, in which project document I can find it. And why I say this is a necessary question, because all the inputs that goes to your financial model, they need to be well referenced. Okay, so you need to have a justification for each and every input. And for contingency, so let me give you the answer. The answer is in the technical studies. Okay, so what happens during the appraisal stage? Sponsors, they will have their own consultants, advisors, external advisors to basically produce different reports to them so that they understand the project better and they can also present the project better to lenders. And it's also a requirement from lenders, of course, to have all these project documents and all these studies. One of these studies, as I said, is the technical study, where the external technical advisor will go and check all the aspects and technicalities around the project, but they will also review the cost and provide estimates for project cost. And one of these cost items is contingency. So the sponsor's technical advisor will come up with this report, and they're going to say, based on their benchmarking or on their understanding of the project, they recommend, for example, 5% of total project cost to be included under funded contingency provision. Then what happens is that the lenders also, once they receive the project proposal, they're going to also hire their own consultants, and one of these consultants is the technical advisor for the lenders. And this technical advisor, they're going to review the report from the sponsor advisor, they're going to review all the project documents, and they're going to come up with their own estimates. And for the contingency, they might not necessarily be in line, the sponsor and the lenders. Why is that? Because we know that lenders are more conservative in their point of view compared to sponsors. So they might not agree on the amount and they might negotiate to understand each other. But eventually, what's going to be documented in the loan agreement is going to be the amount of contingency provision. And that's the one that needs to be included in the financial model under the lender base case, and all the debt sizing, calculation of debt ratios, default ratios, and all that is going to be based on the lender's viewpoint on the contingency amount. Okay, so your model need to have this flexibility to also accommodate different contingency provision from the point of view of lenders and from the point of view of sponsors. So one other thing that I want to mention here before I go back to the next question is about when you review someone else's financial model and how you need to treat the contingency. So basically, as I told you, if you already have a loan agreement or the technical studies, you go and check in there to understand what is the contingency provision in the model and what is in the project document and whether they are in line. But I have come across models when I review that I did not see the contingency provision in the budget. So when I look at the breakdown of the total project cost, I do not see the contingency provision. Of course, I will double check in the model as well to see whether I can find what is included under contingency in the budget. But if I don't see it and it's happened to me, I always go back to my 3-question method or 3-step method in asking question when it comes to reviewing someone else's model. I will not condemn right away. However, I will ask the question. We could not identify the contingency provision as a separate line item in the budget. Can you please point out where you have included the contingency in the model or within the cost? Because sometimes what they happen, they have already included some maybe contingency within the cost and you cannot see it. But this is something that is really not recommended. for different reasons: flexibility, transparency, and also for monitoring purposes later on. Once you get into construction, you need to separate the funded contingency account from the other costs so that you can monitor how much of this contingency provision you have used and how much is remained. Now the next question is, what happens if the project is completed and done, but we have completed the project not only on budget, but we also have some contingency, funded contingency remaining in our project account? So what's going to happen to that money? First of all, as I say here in my blog post, statistically this is really rare. And I recommend you to go and check the very nice book, project management book, How Big Things Get Done. And over there you will see about all the numbers of the cost overruns. He has classified them over different technology and different type of infrastructure projects, and I might put the chart here in my blog post as well. But if it happens that you have some money left, you didn't spend all your contingency over the construction period, then what happens is it depends on how the contracts are drafted. This is something that is also subject to negotiations. I have seen different cases for how unspent contingency can be treated. One was for a power project, when in the PPA agreement there was an article that was mentioning that any unspent contingency will be basically a percentage of it will be going toward the reduction of the tariff. So at the end of the construction, if there was any money left in the account, we were rerunning the model at that stage and coming up with a new tariff, with a new table that we were replacing with the old one because of this. And of course, a percentage of it to the sponsors as an incentive and as a reward for their great job at completing the project on time, on budget, and even better without spending all the contingency. I have seen other cases where the lenders, they allow the contingency, unfunded contingency, to be distributed as dividends. However, not right at commercial operation dates, not right at the start of operation, but normally 2 years after the commercial operation date, which is sometimes called, if I remember the term correctly, it was financial completion date. So on that date, they will still look at and monitor all the dividend lockups and all the criteria for allowing the release as dividends or any form of shareholder repayment. And they might also put a cash sweep so that they can also get a percentage of that remained contingency to repay their debts. So these are all the structure that I have seen and I have come across. Next question, which is an important question if you have a long duration of construction, is what about the payment curve, the payment schedule for the contingency? So in my example here in my Excel file, I told you I have these different options, okay? So if I activate this option 4, which is the case here, I have a contingency provision defined for each of the cost item. So when I want to distribute this 5% of EPC as contingency, I'm going to use the same, let me zoom in, I'm going to use the same basically profile as I have defined for my base cost. So that's easy, and to me that makes sense as well, because when we are in the appraisal stage, financial close, we still don't know how we're going to spend this contingency, okay? But it makes sense to say that we're going to distribute it according to all the cost items and how we define the payment schedule for each cost item. However, if you have like a percentage of total project cost or percentage of EPC or just a fixed contingency amount, then you need to define a payment curve for your contingency as well. Okay? So which I did here, which is hard-coded. So what I have come across are different profiles. Sometimes what I do is that I say, okay, I'm gonna say that I'm gonna fund it. The contingency, I am gonna assume it that it's gonna be drawdown. The drawdown is gonna be, or I'm gonna use it the same way I am spending for my EPC, okay? This is a bit conservative. Why? Because normally we have these upfront payment, these upfront payments to our EPC, 30%, 25%, 10%, depending on how we negotiate, of down payment to our EPC. So assuming that I am spending 30% of all my contingency right in construction day one or month one is kind of conservative. However, that's something that you can do. The other thing I do is to assume that I spend all the contingency equal distribution throughout the construction. That also makes sense because I don't know exactly when I'm going to spend this contingency, so I can just spread it equally across the construction period. You might also be very conservative and assume that you spend and fund all the contingency, 100% of it, in day one of your construction. Okay, that's quite, as I said, it's quite conservative. And if you have a construction period which is 3 years, 4 years, as it is common for hydro, geothermal, and other type of projects, then having, how you spread your contingency makes a significant difference in your total project cost, in your debt sizing, in basically all the negotiations that you're going to do based on that. Okay, so you need to be very careful in that case. However, if you work on a solar project, which takes 6 to 12 months to build and to complete, then it doesn't matter how you're going to distribute it. It's not going to have a major impact. So you might want to be conservative. Last thing as a question, I'm just going to pose it here and let you reflect on it, but it can be also a subject of another video, is how are we going to monitor this funded contingency post-construction when we have actuals versus projections? So how are we going to monitor that and see how much we have spent and how much is left from this money that we funded during the appraisal stage? Okay, so that's it for today. If you're interested, to see how to model this, it's very simple. But if you're interested, let me know. I can extract it from this main model and share it with you if you're interested under my Eloquence account, which I have lots of free materials there. So thank you for watching and hope to see you next time. You can sign up for my free online course on project finance, spreadsheet design by visiting my website phoenixmode.com. Under courses, you can register for free. Make sure you also check the resource section. There's plenty of free material available for you. See you there.